We've all seen them. Utterly astounding 3D films made in Unreal that blow us away with their photorealistic lighting, their highly detailed models, their massive landscapes, and we've thought, I could never do that. But I wish I could. Well, you can, and I'd like to tell you how. You stand on the shoulders of giants. I thought, as you may do, that making a 3D animated film was a goal that would take years of training and practice, and I'd pretty much written it off as implausible, if not impossible, given my time constraints. However, there have been technical advancements and massive shifts in the industry in very recent times that has somewhat democratized the process. Making completely 3D animated shorts was now an option to me, and it's also an option for you. I wanted to do my part and give something back, so I thought I'd lay out some of the lessons that I learned through this process. And hopefully, if you're looking at using Unreal for filmmaking, then they'll be of some use to you as well. These aren't so much technical pointers, although I am putting together an Unreal course that will include a lot of those. These are more a shift in mindset or perspective that I underwent fairly early on that helped me focus on exactly what I needed to learn to achieve my goals. I'd like to break this down into 3 points. 1. What do you want to do? 2. You don't need to know everything. 3. Practice versus theory. Firstly, a little background. How did I get into 3D filmmaking? Well, it was a combination of having some initial lockdown-related free time, but also numerous lockdown-related constraints on local and international filmmaking. Suddenly, everything seemed more expensive, more complicated, or just plain impossible, especially on lower budgets. And I had a Kickstarter-backed AFK miniseries that I needed to deliver, so how was I going to get it all done? Enter Unreal Engine and the prospect of virtual filmmaking. I realized that it might be possible to create environments and sets far beyond the scale of what we'd been achieving before. And this leads nicely into the first part, which is the question of what did I want to do with Unreal? Unreal is a massive program. To quote Douglas Adams, you just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. And that can be pretty intimidating. When I first started using it, at times it just seemed overwhelming how much work was involved in doing the seemingly simplest things. And to be honest, there were plenty of moments where I nearly quit. But what kept me going was that I could see the potential. I could look on YouTube and see the amazing things that other people were doing with it. I could watch the endless amounts of incredibly generous free tutorials on everything from landscape creation to lighting to animation and beyond. And eventually I began to realize that there were vast swathes of the program that I would never need to touch because they didn't relate to filmmaking. That helped me to focus on exactly what I needed to learn and ignore the rest, which leads nicely into point 2. I wouldn't describe myself as a 3D animator. I'm a filmmaker who uses 3D animation. Now, this may sound like a slightly pedantic and minor difference, but I think it's actually really important. And it was the shift in mindset that really helped me move forward past some of the early stumbling blocks. Let me give you some examples. This is the work of 3D animators, the short film Sprite Fright. It was completely made inside the 3D platform Blender, which is free to download. Every environment, character, and prop was made from scratch by the artists. It's an incredible film. It's super funny. I suggest you watch it right after this. This is a clip from my work. Let's freeze it for a moment to examine what I made from scratch. I didn't make that. That came from a 3D Assets website. I didn't make the landscape. It came from Megascans. The rain is a plugin. The explosions were from the Unreal Marketplace. The animation is from Mixamo. I think I made the blaster bolt, which is basically a tube with a glow on it. Here's another example from our Epic Games funded short film Cheng Beng. Once again, on the face of it, this looks like a very complex scene, but let's break it down. The plants and their pots were all free from Megascans, as were the floor and wall textures. They were literally drag and drop. The fans, cabinets, and lanterns were from various 3D asset sites. The characters were made in Real Illusion's character creator, although the hair was purchased from the Unreal Marketplace. I think literally the only things that I actually built from scratch here were the prayer blocks on the cabinet, and they are basically just textured boxes. Otherwise, this really is just utilizing objects and materials that other people have created and made available, of which there is an almost endless supply. This is the distinction for me between being a 3D animator and a filmmaker who uses 3D animation. 3D animation is a discipline that may take years to master, and they will always have my respect and admiration. But I decided very early on, after trying to teach myself various things, that I was not a 3D animator. I'm a filmmaker. And if you were making a film in real life, you wouldn't do everything yourself. You would hire a costume designer, a set builder, a props maker. The only difference here is that your sets, costumes and props are all digital and available for reasonable prices from sites such as Sketchfab, TurboSquid and CG Trader. You don't need to know or make everything, because chances are that whatever you're trying to achieve from scratch in Unreal has already been simplified to a few button clicks by someone else and made available on the marketplace. Stand on the shoulders of these giants so you can focus on the fun stuff. That's not to say that my weeks of struggling trying to teach myself how to model objects in Blender or create a fully rigged character from scratch were all wasted. Far from it. Because even if I hadn't mastered the practice, I had learned the theory, which has been incredibly useful. I learned the theory behind virtual textures in terms of blending objects into landscapes, and then I found a plugin that did it for me. I learned that facial expressions in characters aren't created by facial bones, as I'd always assumed, but by a combination of pre-made expressions called blend shapes. I learned how weight painting works. I learned about alembic imports for importing hairstyles and fur. I haven't practically mastered a damn one of these things, but I have a pretty good knowledge of the theory of how they all work, and that has helped me to no end in troubleshooting whatever issues arise, which they do, all the time. So even if you are struggling to master the practice, as I did, learn the theory. Download Blender and try to build and texture something with it. Try to sculpt and rig a character. Even if you're not entirely happy with the results, you will have gained invaluable knowledge as to how the process works, which will help you no end. To avoid frustration, remind yourself you're not trying to master the practical. You're not trying to become a 3D animator. You're gaining a working knowledge of the theory that will help you in what's really important, your filmmaking. And that's it. That was basically the journey that took me from utterly clueless to creating my first animated short, first day, around 3 months later. And I will clarify that even during the making of the short, I was still learning so much. There's a fairly obvious reason that you've probably already guessed that I picked stormtroopers as a subject, and yes, it's because they didn't need lip sync, which I hadn't figured out yet. But every short teaches me something new, and every time the process becomes faster, to the point where my latest Christmas-themed short was conceived, written, recorded, and animated in a single day. Your journey will be different, but I hope that some of what I've gone over today might help you. Focus on what you need to, have fun, and start putting your dreams on screen.